Hello everyone, Seamus here, and in this video we'll be talking about what has had the internet transfixed for the past few months, Windows 11 hardware compatibility. After long last, Windows 11 has finally been released to consumers, and the only thing more controversial than its design is its list of system requirements. Microsoft came under quite a lot of fire for this, not just because of the high requirements, but how vague they were being about what would run Windows 11 and what wouldn't. First, it was anything on the list. Then it was that it needed TPM 2.0 and Secure Boot. Then certain beta copies or certain OEM systems wouldn't require TPM. And then it was you needed a CPU from after 2017. Then Microsoft said that wasn't the case. Then there was that Microsoft document that stated a hard and soft floor list of requirements, saying you only needed TPM 1.2 and any CPU, and then that got removed. And then Microsoft came out with the PC Health Check app, which told everyone they couldn't run Windows 11 and gave no reason for it. And then that got taken down for the longest time before being put back up a few weeks ago. And then they said you needed to put a spoon under your pillow on a night with each planet aligned before making a sacrifice to the Lord Clippy of an arm, a leg, and a firstborn child. You see, it's all a big mess. Oh, and I was kidding about the spoon. The rest is true. Microsoft's justification for such high system requirements is that by limiting what hardware can access Windows, the Windows platform will be more secure and stable. Windows has always been a very open platform, and when you start using old or weird hardware with poor support, you start running into problems. It isn't Microsoft's fault. It simply isn't possible to design an operating system to take into account every single different piece of PC hardware that exists. So Microsoft has taken the opposite approach by limiting Windows 11 to only the hardware that it can verify, which theoretically leads to a much better overall experience for the consumer who buys a supported computer. According to Microsoft, the new hardware requirements will reduce instability or crashing by over 60%. On the flip side, however, these strict requirements will result in a lot of people scrapping their otherwise perfectly good computers just so they can run Windows 11, leading to an e-waste crisis, which would be disastrous for the environment. And many really question Microsoft's motives for these high requirements, as for most users, Windows is already stable enough. Does the improvement in stability really justify having to throw out a perfectly good computer? Keep in mind, whenever you buy a new computer that comes with Windows, Microsoft receives a portion of the money you paid, as per their licensing agreement with your computer's manufacturer. So, is Microsoft really looking out for its users, or are they just trying to get people to give them more money? Feel free to discuss in the comments. Of course, ever since Windows 11 beta copies began releasing to subscribers of the Windows Insider program, many different methods popped up to coax it to run on unsupported computers. But there always remained the question, will this work in the final release? So, in this video, I will be trying to install the Windows 11 official release copy on an unsupported machine. The computer that I'll be using is this Lenovo ThinkCentre M58 from 2008 or 2009, I think. This machine can be seen in a previous video where I get macOS 10.9 Mavericks running on it. But for today, its hard drive will be changed out to allow it to pull double duty as our unsupported hardware testbed. Let's compare its specs to Windows 11's system requirements. According to the listed requirements on Microsoft's website, at minimum Windows 11 requires a 1 GHz dual-core processor, 4 GB of RAM, 64 GB available hard drive space, a DirectX 12 supported display adapter, system firmware supporting UEFI with Secure Boot, and Trusted Platform Module version 2.0. For those unaware, the TPM is a small device located on the motherboard or system firmware that primarily stores drive encryption and secure boot keys. As a result of the TPM requirement in Windows 11, scalpers began reselling dedicated TPM modules on eBay for absurd prices. What was once a $25 device was being sold for hundreds of dollars or more. In reality, most people with otherwise supported machines wouldn't actually need a device like this. Many CPUs or motherboards already have a TPM built in, which is perfectly sufficient for Windows 11. You just need to enable it in the BIOS. So let's see how our Lenovo stacks up. For the CPU, the Lenovo is equipped with an Intel Core 2 Duo E8400 dual-core processor clocked at 3 GHz, which in theory sounds like it conforms to the requirements on paper, but it was manufactured before 2017, which is supposedly required for official compatibility, so I'm going to put it in yellow. This machine is currently equipped with 6 GB of DDR3 RAM and a 500 GB hard drive, both perfectly within support. As for graphics, this machine currently has an AMD Radeon HD 6450 with 1 GB of VRAM. This card isn't original, I added it to gain macOS support. This card isn't natively supported in DirectX 12, but it should work perfectly fine through backwards compatibility. It just means you'll likely miss out on some of DirectX 12's exclusive features, such as direct storage and auto HDR. But if you're legitimately considering running HDR content on a low-end GPU from 2011, then you should probably reevaluate your life choices. As for the firmware, this machine does not support UEFI or Secure Boot, and offers only TPM 1.2. I want to try installing Windows 11 both as an in-place upgrade and as a clean installation, so I'm going to first start out by installing Windows 10. You can see me installing Windows 10 now. It boots up the installer USB perfectly fine and continues through the Windows install process without issue, as this machine is fully supported in the latest release of Windows 10. After a few minutes of waiting, Windows 10 is installed and working just fine. I didn't even have to install a single driver. In fact, dare I say it, this machine is actually pretty usable. Most common tasks like productivity, web browsing, and consuming media all work perfectly fine. I think a lot of computer enthusiasts often lose sight of how the majority of people actually use computers. They're not editing 4K video streams or playing the latest AAA games. This isn't Linus Tech Tips. I'm from Eastern Canada, where if it works, we don't complain. This computer also has some room for upgrades. The RAM could be increased to more than 8GB, you could install an SSD, the CPU could be upgraded to a faster Core 2 Quad or Core 2 Extreme, the PCIe slot can accept any low-profile single-slot GPU, which means you could install up to a GeForce GT 1030. It may even be possible to install a low-profile GTX 1650, but you would need to destructively modify the case due to the awkward location of the slot. My point is, this hardware might be old, but with a bit of love, this can be a very usable computer for many people. Anyway, let's check Microsoft's PC Health Check app. It can be downloaded from Microsoft's website. Once it's downloaded, just run the installer. When Microsoft originally released this program, it told many users that they simply couldn't run the operating system without being given any reasoning as to why. Supposedly, this has been changed. So, let's see if it has. Once the program is installed, we can run it and click check. And, unsurprisingly, we can't run Windows 11. However, it does at least give us some insight to what is incompatible. Well, let's try to install Windows 11 anyway. Of course, because we're unsupported, Windows 11 can't be installed through Windows Update. That pretty much goes without saying, so let's try downloading it from Microsoft's website. The Windows 11 download page has three options. Option 1 downloads the Windows 11 Install Assistant used for upgrading existing installations of Windows 10 2004 or later. Option 2 is for the media creator. Similar to what Microsoft did for Windows 10, it can download an ISO image or create a bootable USB installer drive. The third option allows us to download an ISO image directly from the site. I'm going to first try the Windows 11 Install Assistant and see where that takes us. I downloaded it and ran it, and it refused to work. It complains about unsupported hardware and tells me to run the PC Health Check app for more information. Since that didn't work, I'm going to download the media creator and see if it gives me any more options. Interestingly, the media creator no longer has the option to upgrade directly from here. For the moment, I'm just going to use it to download the ISO image. I wanted to see if it was possible to upgrade Windows 11 directly, so I opened the ISO image and ran setup.exe. At first, everything looked like it was working, but it eventually got to the checking PC stage and errored out, complaining that my computer is unsupported. Amusingly, under Here's Why, there's absolutely nothing, which is strangely fitting. So it appears none of the official means seem to be working, so I'll have to try my hand at a few alternative approaches. Just in case I needed to modify the Windows 11 ISO file, I created a copy called Windows 11 Modified. I renamed the original to Windows 11 Unmod. I ended up not having to modify Windows 11 media directly. I'm mentioning this just to avoid confusion. I'm going to try 3 different methods to get this working. To my knowledge at least, the Windows 11 hardware requirements aren't intrinsic to the operating system, but rather an arbitrary check performed during Windows setup. These methods essentially trick or force the Windows setup to bypass or ignore the hardware check. The first method is using the registry editor, the second is to replace the appraiser res.dll file in the installation media, and the third is to bypass the Windows 11 setup altogether. I'll be trying all 3 of these out on both an upgrade and a clean install. I've heard of all of these working at one point or another during Windows 11's beta phase, so it'll be interesting to see which ones work in the final release. Let's start out by trying the Windows Registry hack. We'll go ahead and open up the Windows Registry editor and navigate to HKey Local Machine, Software, Setup. Right-click and create a new key. We'll name this key labconfig. Inside our new labconfig key, create 2 new 32-bit dword values. Name these Bypass TPM Check and Bypass Secure Boot Check. On each dword value, right-click and select Modify. Set both values to 1. Click OK and exit the editor. I know this trick used to work on some of the beta copies, but the RTM version is a whole new territory. Let's see if it worked. I'll open up Setup once more from the Windows 11 image, and unfortunately, the same issue. Well, it appears this method no longer works, at least for upgrading. Now let's try the Appraiser Res.dll hack. In order to perform this trick, we must also acquire a Windows 10 install image. For that, I'll head to Microsoft's Windows 10 page. Download the Media Creator and download the ISO image using the tool. Now we'll go ahead and extract the files from the Windows 11 image to a directory on the hard drive. From here, I'll be able to modify the files. I'll open it up and navigate to the Sources folder. I'll also open the newly downloaded Windows 10 image and open its Sources folder. From here, I'm going to copy the Appraiser Res.dll file to the Windows 11 Sources folder. I'll choose Replace File in Destination. This hack also supposedly worked on some insider copies of Windows 11, so let's give it a test. I'll go ahead and run Windows 11 Setup once more, and it seems like we have the same issue. I guess it's safe to say that this method doesn't work either. Worry not, though, I have one more idea. As I mentioned, the hardware check isn't part of the Windows 11 operating system, but rather the installer program. So theoretically, Windows 11 will work fine as long as we can bypass the Windows 11 installer. So how would we do that? Easy, by using a Windows 10 installer. You may be wondering, is that possible? Well, theoretically, yes. It's actually quite simple once you understand how the Windows setup actually works. I imagine you're probably guessing it just copies all the install files one by one to the destination drive. And that was true, at least at one time, but since Windows Vista, setup actually behaves fundamentally different. Rather than copying files one by one, the install media simply contains a hard drive image, already containing all of the install files, which the setup just clones to your drive. This made Windows setup much faster, significantly improved reliability, and for computer manufacturers, allowed easier customization of images for OEM systems. Windows Vista released back in 2006, and the Windows setup has stayed pretty much the same. Even a lot of the interface elements have remained unchanged. Windows 11 continues this trend, except it adds the hardware check. The image cloning operation is the same, thus it should be possible to modify a Windows 10 installer with the image from a Windows 11 installer and have it install Windows 11 on any machine without issue. Let's give it a try. First of all, I'm going to copy all of the files from my Windows 10 image to a directory on the hard drive that I created, and I'll open the Sources folder. Next, I'll open the Windows 11 image and navigate to its Sources folder. The file we're looking for is install.esd. I'll copy the install.esd file to the Windows 10 Sources folder and click Replace. Install.esd is the image that contains all of the Windows files. It's the largest single file on the disk at nearly 4 GB in size. Now let's try running the Windows 10 setup and see if it will install Windows 11. I opened it and clicked Next. It seemed to be working fine until it got to the Updating Windows portion of the setup, at which point it promptly crashed. Since it crashed the Updating Windows screen, I imagine what happened was the installer attempted installing Windows 10 updates to our Windows 11 image, which confused it, causing it to crash. I'm going to run the installer again, but this time I'll click Change How Windows Installs Updates. I'll choose Not to Install Updates, and I'll click Next. This seems to work. It checks the PC, this time finding no issue with my hardware. At the summary screen, it reads, Install Windows 11. I'll click Install. If you've ever upgraded a computer to Windows 10, this will seem very familiar. This will either work brilliantly or completely corrupt our Windows install. Once it finished up on the screen, the machine restarted and displayed the Windows 11 logo and began the second stage of setup. Eventually, the machine restarted again and Windows 11 appeared. I opened up sysinfo and, as you can see, a Core 2 Duo E8400, legacy firmware, and secure boot unsupported. In tpm.msc, you can see it detects TPM 1.2. I'm going to hold off on giving my opinions on Windows 11 for now. First of all, I'm going to see if it's possible for us to return to Windows 10. According to Microsoft, you can return to Windows 10 without erasing your hard disk within 10 days of upgrading to Windows 11. In order to do this, open Settings, navigate to Windows Update, click Advanced Options, Recovery, and go back. Unfortunately, this gives us an error message saying we aren't able to downgrade Windows, citing that the files it archived from Windows 10 are damaged or missing. Well, these files are typically located in C windows.old. I can tell you for a fact that I didn't tamper with these files, so I imagine this is a side effect of using a Windows 10 installer. So if you plan to upgrade an unsupported machine, assume that it may be a one-way trip. Now let's talk about how to perform a clean installation. This is preferable if you're upgrading, replacing, or wiping your computer's hard drive, so you don't have to install Windows twice. Normally, you would use the Windows 11 Media Creator to automatically create a USB installer, but for some reason, it wouldn't detect my flash drive. It would show up in Windows, but not in the Media Creator. So I just decided to use Rufus, which is a free piece of software for creating bootable flash drives. Connect a USB drive and open Rufus. Select the drive from the menu at the top. On this menu, choose ISO image and click Select. Choose the Windows 11 ISO and click Open. On this menu, we'll want to choose MBR since this machine uses legacy firmware. Now click Create. This will take a while depending on the speed of your flash drive and your computer. Eventually, it will finish. Now, reboot the computer. On this machine, repeatedly pressing the F12 key at startup will display a list of boot devices. I'll take the arrow down and select the USB drive and press Enter. Press any key when the prompt appears. Windows 11 will begin booting from the USB. I'll select my region settings and click Next, and Install Now. Interestingly, the logo inconsistency from the beta versions continue in this RTM release. I'm not going to add a product key at the moment, but Windows 11 will activate with any product key from Windows 7 or higher. Unsurprisingly, it gives us an error about unsupported hardware. Once again, I'm going to try each trick to bypass the error screen. First off, the registry hack. Close out of Setup and click Yes. On this screen, press Shift F10 on your keyboard to open the command prompt. Type regedit and press Enter. The editor will appear. Otherwise, this process is the same as earlier. Once I've added the keys, I'll close out of the registry editor and the command prompt. I was somewhat more optimistic that this trick would work for a clean install, but it didn't. The same error screen is displayed. So I rebooted the machine back into Windows from the hard drive and attempted the appraiserres.dll hack by once again copying the appraiserres.dll file from the Windows 10 image to the sources file on the Windows 11 install USB, choosing to overwrite existing files. I rebooted the computer only to find the same result again. I even tried the registry hack as well, but no change. So that once again leaves us with the Windows 10 installer method. In order to do it for a clean install, I used Rufus to create a USB installer using the Windows 10 image, and then copied the Windows 11 install.esd file to the sources folder on the USB, replacing the existing file. Starting up from the flash drive, it looks exactly like Windows 10, but when I get to the version select screen, it reads Windows 11. Installation continues just like normal, and after a few reboots, a rather broken Windows 11 animation plays, along with the new startup sound. And the first time setup appears. Rather stupidly, the Home Edition of Windows 11 requires a Microsoft account to be used in order to set up Windows. In addition, I noticed this brand new screen in setup that asks how you'll be using the computer. At first, I thought this might be a cool idea to configure the computer automatically based on its use case, but in reality, all the setting changes is the ads that it'll show you on the next few pages. For instance, if you choose Gaming, it will attempt to upsell you on Xbox Game Pass, or if you choose Productivity, it will try to get you to sign up for Office 365. How obnoxious. After saying no to all of Microsoft's requests for my personal information, it performs the final stage of setup before loading the desktop. Good things are coming my way. That's an odd way of describing Windows 11. Maybe it's a sarcastic remark? One thing that I'd like to clear up straight away is the situation surrounding Windows Update. A few months ago, some Microsoft representatives admitted that it was possible to run Windows 11 on incompatible hardware, but the operating system would be unsupported. I feel this confused a lot of people because typically whenever Microsoft says an OS is unsupported, it means it will no longer receive security updates. This was the case with Windows XP back in 2014 and Windows 7 in 2020. Well, I can confirm Windows Update still works on this unsupported machine. I can go and check for updates, and it downloads the latest Microsoft security patches. It's very likely that by unsupported, Microsoft simply meant that if you had an issue, Microsoft could simply say, "It's unsupported," and not offer you any kind of assistance or compensation. It's just a way of covering their butts legally. Although it's too early to say what the situation will be for Windows 11 feature updates, which will likely come out in the preceding months. As for performance, I honestly can't discern any decline in performance from Windows 10 to 11. Everything remains perfectly functional and usable, which is somewhat of an insult given the high system requirements. So, should you install Windows 11 on an unsupported computer? I honestly don't think so. If you combine the janky method to get it running with the possibility that something will go wrong or an update will make it impossible, there isn't a whole lot you're gaining over Windows 10. Sure, the interface is pretty. It's got all our favorite new themes like Blue Flower with the lights out, vaguely off-putting lake, and Space Pringle. That stuff is all nice, but there's a very obvious and severe lack of features, not to mention good Windows 10 features that got cut. Android app compatibility is completely missing in the RTM version, along with the new Microsoft Store and that new version of Microsoft Paint that was announced for some reason. A lot of Windows 10's problems are still present here, including all the adware. Yeah, all this crap is included with a clean copy. Not only that, but the interface just feels so obtuse. The slick and customizable Windows 10 Start menu was replaced with what looks like a phone's home screen. The Widgets button is less like the beloved Windows Vista feature than it is the freaking Facebook homepage. The taskbar isn't movable and resizable, and everything just seems to take up so much screen real estate. On the other hand, however, Windows 11 seems to be quite stable, and if you're using a supported machine, I think its quirks can be overlooked if the security improvements stand true. But to me, Windows 11 in its current state feels like such a downgrade, and compared with Microsoft's money-grabbing approach at hardware support, means I really can't recommend it at the moment. But if for some reason this is something you want to do, it certainly is possible. I don't know if it will remain this way. This is only the RTM version of Windows 11, and things may change as the OS evolves. With that being said, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.